Hi, welcome to the Supercharged Plant-Based Lifestyle Show. I'm Valeria Popov, and I'm a whole food plant-based transformational coach, and I transform people's waistlines. I specialize in sustainable weight loss and prevention and reversal of common diseases with the magical power of plants. So today, me and Sharon McRae are going to be talking about how to successfully transition kids to a plant-based lifestyle. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much for having me, Valeria. It's nice to see you. Nice to meet you in person, sort of. As close as
Yes.
that.
Thank you so much for your time and for so willingness to share your knowledge with you. So would you please share with our viewers who might not know you, what you do and how you transition to a plant-based?
Sure. So I am a plant-based certified health coach. I'm also an instructor for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine's Food for Life program. And I run a pretty popular meetup group here in Columbia, Maryland, called the Columbia, Maryland Forks Over Knives Meetup Group. We have almost 2,000 members. And so I transitioned actually over a period of decades. I started moving in this direction and not even knowing why when I was in my late teens, and I saw a news report about cattle and I was eating roast beef, and I just put down my fork and said never again. So I stopped eating red meat in my teens. And then in my 20s, I was a biology major in college, and I was doing dissections as part of that curriculum, and I became nauseated when I was eating chicken, and so I stopped eating poultry. And pretty much the same is true. And so then I was a vegetarian for many years until I was in my 30s. By that time I had married, we were trying to have a family, and I was concerned about mercury and toxicity. So I stopped eating fish and seafood, and then continued as a vegetarian until I was in my 40s. And that was in 2009. My mom was dying of breast cancer, and I had this epiphany one day and decided to stop eating all animal products. And so I've been vegan since 2009. I have a husband and 3 children, although they're not children anymore. They're now 21-year-old twin daughters and a soon-to-be 18-year-old son. And at the time that I transitioned them, they were eating a not so healthy, in other words, processed vegetarian diet. So they've never eaten meat or fish, but they have eaten eggs and cheese and all kinds of dairy. And in 2009, when I transitioned them. So they were about 10 and 6 at that time. And there's been no looking back. My husband came on board right after Forks Over Knives came out. And so we've all been eating this way ever since then. And I transitioned from, what I did was I started off with the vegan, but it was kind of the unhealthy, the processed form of the vegan food, that we were doing a lot of the Daiya cheese or Daiya cheese, however you pronounce it. So they were eating a lot of their same favorite foods, just made with the substitutes. And then I learned about Dr. Joel Fuhrman. And I read the book Disease Proof Your Child, and my whole world changed because I had a very strong family history of cancer. My mom, as I said, had died of breast cancer. My dad is a kidney cancer survivor. Both of my grandmothers died of different forms of cancer in their early 60s. It's all through my family. It's also all through my husband's family. His father just died of cancer. His mother's a colon cancer survivor. His brother's fighting cancer now. So it's all through our family. And I was very concerned about our kids. And at that time, I was studying to become a health coach, and I read the book, The China Study by T. Colin Campbell. And when I read that casein, which is the predominant protein in dairy products, was the most potent cancer-causing agent there was, I closed the book, I sat my kids down, and I said, we're going to change the way that you eat. No more dairy. They cried, they carried on, and I promised them that I would make food taste amazing. I didn't know how I was going to do that because I didn't like to cook at the time. I worked in a lab for many years, and cooking was very much like doing lab work, mixing, stirring, weighing, measuring. I didn't want to do that when I got home. So I really didn't like to cook. And I went to a conference called Vegetarian Summerfest in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and met someone who is now like my sister, Chef AJ. And I watched her cooking demonstration, tasted her food, and was blown away. Bought her book Unprocessed, brought it home, and started making recipes out of it. And the first recipes I started with were the dessert recipes, because I knew if I could lure them in with dessert, then I could seal the deal. And that's what I did. I started making her brownies, her raw brownies. And then I moved on to some of the savory dishes. I remember easy cheesy peasies and the mushroom stroganoff being two favorites, and the disappearing lasagna. And everybody, my whole family, was enjoying the food so much that it became fun to cook. And so that was the start of our journey. And here we are today.
Yes, thank you so much. It's an amazing journey. And I love for people, especially for people who think that they have to go overnight. This is very not true. Look at you, like you went, it was years for you to eliminating some, of course, it's better to just go ahead and reburn yourself and like wake up this morning, I'm gonna not do anything, but not that many people can do that. And it's a brilliant example of how you did it and transitioning yourself step by step, which anyone can do as long as you're like aiming for this plant-based lifestyle and you just do it one step at a time, which is perfect. And
well,
yeah,
I didn't know that was where I was aiming. I was just doing it because that's kind of what fit into my life at the time. But I work with so many people now, and it really depends on your motivation. If you are someone who has a family history, then maybe you're less likely to make the jump quickly. But if you're someone who's just been diagnosed with the disease, or you have 50 pounds to lose, or you have high blood pressure and you're told you have to go on medication, then you're more motivated. And so I do see a lot of people literally going cold tofu or whatever you want to call it, and doing it overnight. And it's pretty amazing, and I give them so much credit. But I do think it's easier today because there are so many resources, so many recipe books, so many documentaries, just so much support around the plant-based movement. Plus there's the environmental issues and the ethical issues, of course, which also weigh into the whole transition. So it really, whatever your journey is, I encourage people to just move in that direction.
yes, thank you. And also, you mentioned the community. I feel like for me, it was people are running. For me, one of the biggest things probably, like, yes, the knowledge of the plant-based and why it's so important, and then the community. Because if I would just do it by myself, I probably wouldn't. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't be able to sustain it because I remember myself, and even now, sometimes I do want to go ahead and just, it's a stress and whatever, I'm going to have those chips and salsa or like whatever it is, something that I don't eat and I know it's not good for me. But being in the group, you can always, go in the group and say, hey, I have those cravings. And people will just jump in. It's like, you don't need that, girl. Like being in the community is one of the things. And especially if you're new, because there's so many people who already went through it, who can give you all kinds of advice, tips, tricks, suggestions, or anything, like make your life easier. But let's talk about kids now. Well, I have two. I have two kids. My son is 4.5 and my daughter is almost 3. So my son, I never had any resistance. That's why I love you, Sharon, because you can put more information. You can give us more information, because for me, I never had that much resistance from my son to go plant-based, because he actually never liked meat. He liked cheese, he liked dairy. So that was kind of a thing that he would still have cravings and wanted to. But you know what? It's like with anything in life with kids, like if you want them to like stop doing something, you will experience weeks of whining and crying and people like asking, kids are asking to have that back into their life. But c'est la vie, like if you know why you're eliminating something, like I knew that dairy is not good for my child. So I just said no. And I love that you mentioned the Disease Prove Your Child by Dr. Furman, because this is my absolutely #1 book, because, like there are a lot of information, great ones, but the most important part that he's talking about is that it's from the how you conceive your child and what the child after the he or she is out, what the kids eat right up to like they're 18 or 16 or 18. That's the period of time that you want to feed them the healthiest way, because that's where all the diseases everything that you might have in the future after you're 40, 50, 60, that's when it's all formed. So that's why it's so important for our kids to eat healthy. And I know that there are two contradictions in me that always kind of go together, that I don't want to influence my kids that much. I want them to find their own way, but I want them to be healthy. So it's always like, I never let them eat animal products. My son he doesn't even remember the taste of any animal products. My daughter never had it. But even if it's a junk food, if it's a vegan junk food, I'm very scared to go that road and let them have more than a little bit, because honestly, like we went on vacation and we actually we relaxed and we let them have vegan junk. And you know what? When we came back home, it was very challenging to get them into eating raw foods, broccoli, and all of that stuff. And I, of course, do have tips and tricks for small children, but I want to hear from you, Sharon, like how you transitioned, what you went through with your kids, and how they transformed. So give parents a bit more tricks and a bit more knowledge. What, first of all, what they're gonna face, and how to address it.
So what I would say is, when I first started, I did use the transition foods, like I said, and I used the transition foods to make some of their favorite dishes. So we made a pizza with that cheese. We made French toast, with egg substitute. I mean, we basically made the same food, but just made it vegan with the processed products that were on the market. After I read Disease Proof Your Child, and I got Chef AJ's book on processed, and I learned that you could use whole foods to simulate some of those same things, the kids weren't too happy when I took the diet cheese out. But what I did at that point, like I said, I did sit them down when I made the transition away from cheese and dairy in the first place, when I went from vegetarian to vegan. But when I went from processed vegan to clean whole food vegan, I did not sit them down again. I just gradually stopped buying things and replacing them. So I used to keep the diet cheese shreds in the fridge. And one day, one of my girls was in the fridge going, "Mom, we don't have the diet cheese. Where is it?" And I said, "Oh, we're not buying that anymore." And she was like, "What? What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, it's not really healthy. It's full of oil. It's full of chemicals. It's full of salt. It's not really a healthy food. So instead, we're going to use this nutritional yeast, and we're going to blend it with cashews and, and make some cheesy sauces, and make Parmesan cheese by blending it with nuts or oats and grinding it up in the food processor and sprinkling it on pizzas." And so they weren't happy, at that point. They weren't very happy about it. But they kind of knew, because I was so rigid about taking dairy away, they kind of knew, like, there's no point at this point. There's really, like, they griped about it for a little bit. And then when they saw I wasn't giving in, I think that's the key. If you give in, they know they can get to you. They can wear you down. They can change your mind. But if you're firm about it, and this is something I always encourage parents to do, is come at it from a place of love. Right? You're not coming at it as a dictator, and you're not being a mean mom or whatever. You're coming from a place of love. You explain to them, and this is definitely something I did. Look, I love you so much. You're the most important thing in my life. And I don't want what happened to grandma, which had just happened, to happen to you. And so I want you to be healthy for the rest of your life. I never want you to get cancer. And I want you to eat the healthiest foods that will keep you safe. And so we just started moving in that direction. And then every time I would go to see Dr. Furman in person, if he had an event or a conference, I would come home and say, "Okay, no more peanut butter. Peanut butter has acrylamides in it." And they would scream and yell for a few days, including my husband, because they were all addicted to peanut butter. And we just started buying almond butter. And guess what? They started to prefer almond butter. So it got to the point where I was used to the screaming and yelling and the pushback. And they were used to me saying, "I don't care. You can scream and yell all you want. I don't think we should have food in this house that isn't, optimally healthy." And so we just kept moving in that direction. And I think the key also is that parents need to learn how to be parents and set limits. You wouldn't let your kid bring pornography or illicit drugs into your home, would you? So why let them bring this toxic stuff? Because it really, you have to, the first thing is you really have to buy the premise. You have to buy into the premise, and it is the truth that these processed foods are toxic. They really are. They're not just, they are drugs. Effectively, they hijack the brain, and they make you crave concentrated calories and a dopamine hit. And so, it's really essentially like giving your kids drugs. It's just that they're acceptable drugs. So once you get used to the resistance and they see the message that you're not giving in, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. And what I hear, so basically, first of all, you were educated enough to understand why it's bad, what's bad and why it's bad. So first, educate yourself. If you are not sure why and you're saying no to your kids, they know it. They know that you cannot explain it to them. And second of all, be an alpha parent. You say no, you set the rule. There are rules in the house, and kids, my first thing that before the plant-based, I went to parenting really deep and into connected and attachment parenting. And kids crave an alpha parent. They do crave it. They want those rules. They want you to be like, in the beginning, like they want this hierarchy. They want you to be on the top, knowing that what's right for them, and they can relax in that connection with you, that they are dependent on you. Kids, that's very important for actually parenting thing too. Let your kids to be dependent on you, on your decision, on your rules. And some parents say like, oh, I don't want to deprive my kids of something, but all you deprive your kids is what? Not being healthy? Like, come on.
You're depriving them of sickness. Exactly. And the other thing I wanted to point out is educate yourself first, but then educate them. Educate your spouse, your partner, and then educate your kids, depending on the age, of course. Now, my kids were old enough that I could explain to them about cancer. And then as they got older, and even throughout the journey, as they were growing up, we used to go to Vegetarian Summerfest every summer. We went to all the Veg Fests in the area. We went to all the conferences. We joined a meetup group that was local. So they were exposed to this, and they may not have understood all of it, but they did hear some of the top doctors lecturing about health, and I would reinforce some of it. So they understood the health perspective, but I also came at it because I knew they were kids and they loved animals. I also came at it from the animal side of things. And, one of the movies I showed them was called Vegucated. And it's kind of a lighter film. It's about a filmmaker who finds 3 people on the street in New York and transitions them and has them transition to a vegan diet, not necessarily a healthy whole food vegan diet, but a vegan diet. But there is one scene in the movie where they go through a deserted slaughterhouse, and it's pretty graphic. I thought my kids were old enough at the time. They were young teenagers, and I wanted them to understand because they had never eaten meat. And I thought, well, they should know what it is that everybody else is doing, because eventually they'll come across peer pressure. All their friends will be going out for a burger, and I don't want them to be tempted. So I did expose them to that side of things. They were horrified. They screamed, they yelled, they cried. It was pretty intense, but I thought they should know, but I wish I had known as a kid. I didn't. And I was eating meat up until, like I said, my late teens. So I approached it from all angles. I talked to my husband. I showed him the same documentaries I was watching to make sure he was on board. He was great. He was always very supportive. So educate yourself, educate them, and come from a place of love, I think, are the most important things. And like you said, be an alpha parent. Don't be afraid. Once you know that these things are unhealthy, you shouldn't feel bad or guilty or like you're depriving your child. I will say it's important to give them alternatives that are healthy. Like if my kids went to a school party, they had a party in the classroom, I wouldn't just let them go empty-handed and say, no, you can't have that. I would always make a special treat from home. One year my son had an ice cream party to celebrate some achievement in the classroom. And I called the teacher and I said, he's lactose intolerant, which we later found out he actually was. That wasn't our primary excuse, but I just said, he's lactose intolerant. Is it okay if I bring him a fruit ice cream into the classroom? She said, no problem. Brought it in. My son sat down. He was about 8. 7, 8 years old, sat down, ate his berry ice cream, and all the friends were coming over going, "What's that?" And I said, "It's ice cream and it's made out of just fruit. Can you believe that?" And they were going, "Oh, that's so cool." And I felt guilty, but I wasn't allowed to have them taste it. Meanwhile, all the kids made their own ice cream sundae and they had all these disgusting toppings. And my son and I literally watched in the classroom as the level of noise escalated after the kids had eaten. And he looked at me, he went, "Mommy, it's getting so loud in here." And I explained to him that was the sugar effect. And that evening, I needed to check in with him. And I said to him, "How did you feel in class eating something different than your friends?" And he looked at me and he said, "I felt proud." I said, "You did? Why? Tell me." And he said, "Because I knew I was doing the right thing for my body. I knew I was protecting my health." He goes, "But I also felt sad." And I said, "Why were you sad?" And he said, "Because I was sad that all these other kids were eating food that could hurt them."
Yeah.
So I knew at that moment that I was making the right, I was doing the right thing. I was taking them on the right journey. And today they'll tell you, I mean, you may have seen their interview with Joel, that they are very happy that they were raised this way. I will say that one of my daughters did travel abroad to study, and she was in England, and it was very difficult not to be vegan, but to be whole food vegan, to not eat a lot of oil, the processed cheese. So she did dabble a little bit in that stuff. And she would call me and she would say, "Mom, here's what's on the menu." Sometimes I would look up the menu for her and text her. And she did a couple of times ask for oil-free, but sometimes it was a little tough. So that was, she's 21 and she knows all the information that she knows. And I know I can feel confident sending her out in the world. But she knows she's still living at home. She knows in this house, all we will eat is unprocessed food, and she's fine with it. She loves it. So, you have to give them the good foundation. And like you said, the earliest years are the most important.
Yeah. And I think that what else Joel Furman says, that like up to like they live in your house and it's up to your rules. When they out, it's already been probably 18 years anyway. And
Exactly.
he said, like, after that, they can go ahead and eat junk. I knew that the base is set.
Yeah.
So that's the base. And after that, yes, if they want to just go rebellious and like eat whatever, but they will always come back.
They'll come back and they'll pay. That's the thing. Because they've eaten so clean for so long, if they eat junk, which is what happened, she ate junk and felt bad, and it's like, well, I really don't want to do that again. So, they need to learn that for themselves. I don't think my kids, any of them, I would be shocked. And I hope I don't regret saying this, but I don't think any of them would ever go back to any kind of dairy. Like I said, they've never had meat. I don't think any of them would eat meat. They know exactly what it is. They know where it comes from. I can't imagine them going back to dairy. We've made so many delicious cheesy substitutes, and cheese was, of course, their favorite, like it was mine. But we've made so many delicious cheese substitutes, and there are so many out there. If they wanted something processed, there's so many out there today that I can't envision them ever going back. So it really depends on, what your goals are, what your visions are, but you do have to be confident. And like you said, support is huge. That's why I started the meetup group here, because, we had a meetup group that we were going to. It was very small. It was in someone's home, but I wanted the kids to see that they were not alone. And I also wanted to feel like we were not alone on our journey. So I started the meetup group in 2011 when Forks Over Knives came out, and we had about 20 people. And like I said, today it's almost 2,000. So it's really incredible. But up until COVID, we were doing these monthly potlucks, and we would have between 60 and 100 people show up. And it was always great because it's like the sense of community, other people doing the same thing for different reasons and coming together and sharing this amazing food. So we kind of miss that now. We're just really sad, and we hope we can get back to it someday.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate for me too, because I was at that point when my kids were becoming more social, and I was like, because I have the pod here from the pure pure community, so I'm a leader of the pod here. I was like, this would be so cool for my kids to actually hang out with other people, but like you can't now. But actually, this is something very important too that you mentioned, like educate your kids with love. And yes, you can talk to older kids. From my perspective, I have small ones, and talking actually works too, because my kids now, both of them go to preschool, but before my daughter was younger, it was only my son, and he will come back and he will ask me about meat, and he'll ask me about stuff. And I would just say, well, we don't eat it. We don't eat it. Like, do you know where the meat comes from? And that's like, it's like, I was not really going into the science or anything. I was just talking to them and talking to my son and kind of like educating him a little bit. Like, do you know where meat comes from? And that's what people can do with small kids when they will ask them, like, what about like this person eating, this person eating? It's like, yes, everyone has their own choices. We never judge. Everyone has their own choices. We do how we do, and why. That's why we do it, because all animals are equal. My son actually came to me maybe 3 months or 4 months ago, and was like, I want to eat meat all of a sudden. He doesn't remember eating meat at all, but he came from a preschool and he's like, I want to eat meat. I was like, okay, so do you know what the meat is? It's like, it's animals. I'm like, okay, so it's any animal? He's like, yeah, it's any animal. I was like, okay, at least he's not like doing this like cow or like whatever. So I was like, all right, so your grandma has a cat. Would you go ahead and eat her? Do you know what you're supposed to do to get the meat? He's like, no. I was like, you're supposed to kill the cat, you know?
Right.
He's like, oh. I was like, yeah, that's how you get the meat. You have to kill the animal first.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, would you kill Marta? That's her name, Marta. I was like, no way. I love her. I was like, exactly. Do you want to eat meat after that? He's like, no, I don't. So it's just making sure that they understand that all animals are equal. There is no animals for slaughter, and other animals are for loving and caring about. All animals are the same. And when they realize that, like, and then there are different questions too, why other people do it. And I would say, like, they don't know. Not
Right.
Nobody knows. They just don't know, and it's fine that they do it. They're gonna know when they're gonna know, or they're never gonna know. When we do not judge people, we
Right.
do ours. Like, and I explain them, they're small, but I still have this little talks that when I'm explaining them why it's good, why it's not bad, and all of that stuff. And people will like, they're like, what do I, so when they're like, okay, I want to feed my kids plant-based, what do I, like, is it a salad? I was like, no, it's not a salad. There's so many recipes, there's so many books. Like, I usually all my books I listen, or I just find on the internet. But I was going through my books and I just found this Veggie Mama. There's so many like different, like, it's a huge book.
Yeah.
Your kid probably, like, if you're not plant-based, in their lifespan, they're not going to eat as many recipes.
Exactly. Gina Burton has a great book called Plant Powered Families. She's got a really good website because she's raised kids vegan. There's Forks Over Knives came out with a plant for a powered family type book. There's so many good recipes. And, one of the things I think is the easiest is if you start with the things they already really like to eat. Like for us, it was pizza. So I kept thinking, okay, how can I recreate pizza? And, once we got rid of the processed cheese, I decided to try to play with hummus because hummus has a creamy texture. So I made a pizza flavored hummus, and that recipe's on my website. And they loved it. They absolutely loved it. So we would spread that on an Ezekiel English muffin. And then we would put some tomato sauce and sprinkle some nutritional yeast and put vegetables on it. And they absolutely loved it. So it's just, and we did lasagna. We did all kinds of things with their favorite dishes, and we just translated them into healthier versions. And like I said, tons of cookies, tons of truffles, ice cream out of frozen bananas. And the other tip I'm sure that you share, having little kids, is get them involved in the process, right? Let them look at the recipes with you and say, oh, which one do you like better? This one, or always healthy options, but let them choose the recipe. Let them help if they go to the grocery store, which we're not doing now. But if you go to the grocery store in way past COVID times, take them with you, let them pick out a new fruit or vegetable or whole grain or bean, let them help you prepare it, measure it, stir it in, whatever it is that is appropriate for the child, but get them involved in the process. Make your own pizza night, make your own taco night, make your own potato bar, and give them some autonomy so it's not a battle. So they feel like they're participating, they get to own it, it's their own, and they're more likely to eat it. And also be a great role model. You have to enjoy the food. You have to eat the food, enjoy the food, be positive about the food. Don't act like you're deprived. Just make it a pleasant journey. Maybe have one night that's cooking night, that the family all cooks a meal together. It just has to be a pleasant journey. And if we are good role models, they will follow suit. They really will.
Yes, I really love that you touch on two things that I absolutely love. It's basically a role model because our kids learn by watching us. It doesn't matter what we say. If it doesn't matter what we want them to do, if we don't do it, they're not going to do it. They're not going to believe you. But if you eat a huge salad, or like I do when my kids sometimes go sideways and they're like eating more of, like, I don't know, ask for cookies, for example, in the morning instead of their usual stuff. Like I just shared with you before this live, that like what I do, if I want them to eat broccoli, what I do, I get huge bowl of steamed broccoli with some homemade hummus, and I will join them if they play or if they eat and like draw. I would just sit with them and just start to be curious what they do, and we just have like talk and laugh, and I'm gonna be eating, and in a minute or two I will see those little hands reaching out for my broccoli. It works every time. And another thing is, like, always have your vegetables and fruit cut on the countertops where they can reach, when they can see. Like, it's very appetizing to see many colors. Another thing, what I do when sometimes like I want them to eat a specific thing, for example, it's like a season, I want them to have more vitamin C through vegetables, for example, bell peppers, and it has a little bit of a bitter taste. And sometimes they like it, sometimes they go crazy about it, and then months after that they don't want to eat it. And what I do, like, you can do anything. I have, like, I brought you, like, there are shapes.
Yep. Perfect.
You can do any like fun shapes, what they like dragons, or like, I don't know, whatever they like, princesses. Get that, and like, you know, make like different shapes, different colors. They're gonna absolutely love it. They eat it. Give them dips like ketchup. They love to dip. Ketchup, hummus, like guacamole, like, you know, anything. Kids have, like, if like me and you were not eating that rich food like hummus and tahini, but they can have it. The kids, they need that fat from like a good sources. They do need it. Absolutely. So yes. And another thing that you actually touched about, like the shopping, and I know that some, like, when I will used to bring my kids to the store, they will all over the place, but now we don't. So this is a perfect time for transitioning kids, because they don't go to the store, or you don't go to the store, you order. And what you can say, like, for example, when you transition kids from like the cheese and you said, no, we're not buying it anymore. Now you can say, if the kids are small and then kind of don't understand, it's like, they don't sell it anymore. I don't know what it is.
I love it. That's perfect. Yeah. White
I was like, I know it's kind of like manipulating your kid, but it's good. It's
for their own health, for their health.
Yeah. So what I do now, like if I wanted to eliminate something, like for example, there are like some cookies, we can make our own. Come on. It's so easy. And we used to buy, and they used to, of course, that has so much sugar and oil in there. I'm like, but they're like, were asking me. And when they go to the store, they will grab it. And now I'm like, you know what? They don't make it anymore. I don't know, it disappeared. They're like, oh, but you know, oh well. So that's like another thing, like, you know, find a like silver lining in at least that you can actually eliminate a lot of stuff right now because kids don't go to the store with you. Or
another tip that I have is to feed them when they're hungry. You know, give them the healthy food when they're hungry, because if they're not hungry, if they've just had a snack, for example, and you put out the bowl of broccoli and the hummus or whatever else it is, if you have other alternatives in the house, they are not going to go for the broccoli. But if my kids would walk in the door from school when they were a little bit older, they'd walk in the door from school every day. I had a pot of vegetables, hot vegetables cooking, and a big salad. And they're famished when they walk in the door. They would sit down and eat those two things. You know, and then they would get into the Ezekiel bread with the hummus and all that kind of stuff. But the first thing they would eat were the vegetables, because that's what was there when they walked in the door. So learn how to feed them. Don't give them snacks all through the day. When you want them to eat a healthy meal, give them a healthy meal, you know, and if they're hungry a little bit earlier, feed them earlier. You know, they don't.
I agree. I agree a lot, because when kids are starting to choose, they're not hungry. If they're hungry, they're going to eat whatever. It's
Exactly.
like just us adults. Like, come on, if we start to choose and we start to crave for some food, we're not hungry. We're just trying
Right.
to like play with the food or get satisfied or like get the dopamine going or like whatever it is. For the same for kids. If they don't want this the broccoli, they're not hungry. You're gonna
There's
come back. And a
no
lot
other,
of
right?
yeah, and lots of parents think that their kids are gonna go like they're gonna starve themselves, but it is not true. Yeah, they might not eat for a day, but
But
then
they'll
guess what? Next day you will still like hear the whining or whatever it is, but they're gonna eat.
exactly,
They're
exactly.
smart. Their
Those
bodies
kids,
are smart.
yeah, there are some kids obviously who have special needs, and
Oh
that's
yes,
where
yes,
I would advise someone in that situation to work with a registered dietitian. But for the majority of kids, they will not starve, and even if they put up a fuss and refuse to eat, like you said, they'll eat more at the next meal. The other thing I always tell parents: don't be a short order cook. What you serve is what everyone eats, no alternatives, right? So it's not like you're going to make one dish for one kid and other. And I know people who have done that, who have like driven themselves completely crazy trying to please each child with a different dish. This is dinner. Now I have one daughter who doesn't like sweet potatoes. She just literally will gag on them unless they're in a soup, a stew, a recipe, or a dessert. Then she loves them, but she will not eat a sweet potato. The rest of us love sweet potatoes. So on the nights when I made sweet potato as a main part of the meal, I would give her an alternative grain or something else to have because I didn't want to force her to gag and vomit, right? So that was one exception I did make. But in terms of the meal, the overall meal, everybody eats the same dish. That's just the way it is. So, you learn these boundaries, you learn how to say no and be comfortable with it and know that you're doing the right thing. And you learn that the kids will sometimes show some resistance, but like you said, if you stand your ground, it gets easier. The battle gets much easier. And you give them that autonomy that we talked about before, where they do have the ability to put their own condiments on or add their own ingredients. And it just becomes so much easier. I'm not going to say it's an easy journey. It's not, but it is so worth the investment. And it does get easier with time if you have all the things in place that you need.
exactly. Yes. And just knowing that you're growing the healthiest kids, you
Yes,
know,
that's the true
because
reward.
yeah, our DNA, it's a gun, but the food, basically push the trigger. So that's all it is. And
Absolutely.
how people can find you, how people can follow you. Do you have a website? How people can get a hold of you?
So my website is eatwell, all one word, -staywell.com. I am Healthy Veg Coach on Instagram and Twitter. And I have a Facebook account for Eat Well, Stay Well LLC. And also, if you are in the Columbia, Maryland area or nearby, you can join our Facebook group page.
Cool. Talking about the community. The more communities you guys are in, the more like the better is for you for sure. Any
Exactly.
last piece of advice for our viewers, Sharon? Would you share something?
I would say don't be afraid to be a parent. Don't be afraid to say no because this is the most important gift you will ever give your child.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon, for being here with us today. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having me, Valeria. It was a pleasure talking with you too.
All right. Bye, guys.